The wine cost $340 a bottle. I remember because I'd priced it myself, standing in that liquor store 2 Christmases back, trying to figure out what a man says thank you with when his son has just made partner. It shattered on my kitchen tile 11 seconds after my son-in-law backed his car out of my driveway for what I now understood was the last time he'd ever park it there as family. My daughter wasn't screaming at him. She was screaming at me. And the strange part, the part that still keeps me up some nights, is that 30 seconds before all of it, everyone standing in my kitchen had watched a 66-year-old man go completely, unnervingly quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a single cabinet. Even after he told me, in front of my whole family, that a man my age shouldn't be trusted with a checkbook, let alone a house, I just stood there and listened. Nobody in that kitchen understood how a man could take that much without breaking, and not one of them saw what was coming after. If you've ever gone quiet to keep a family together, if you've ever swallowed something so bitter it changed the shape of your throat, then friend, pull up a chair, because this one's for you. But before I get into it, do me a kindness. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what part of the country you're listening from tonight. Now let me tell you how a bottle of wine ended up in pieces on my floor and why I'm not sorry. My name is Harold Whitfield. Everybody who's mattered in my life has called me Hal. I'm 66 years old, and I spent 31 years as an electrician for the city of Savannah, Georgia, wiring up schools and fire stations and the kind of municipal buildings nobody thinks about until the lights go out. My hands still remember every panel box I ever opened. I retired 4 years ago with a bad rotator cuff, a hearing aid I pretend not to need, and a pension that isn't much but is mine, paid for one job site at a time. I live in a yellow clapboard house on Bonaventure Road that my wife Carol and I bought in 1987, back when the street was still half dirt and the Spanish moss hung so low over the driveway you had to duck to park the truck. Carol picked out the crepe myrtle by the porch. I built the porch swing myself out of cypress, the same summer our daughter learned to walk on it. Nothing in that house came cheap or came easy, and maybe that's exactly why I never once took a single board of it for granted. Carol passed 3 years ago this coming October. Pancreatic cancer, the fast kind. 7 weeks from the diagnosis to the last morning, when I held her hand in our bedroom and felt the exact moment she wasn't holding mine back anymore. After that, Sunday supper became the thing I held on to. Same table, same tablecloth she'd embroidered with little bluebirds along the hem, same seat at the head that I still can't bring myself to sit in most weeks. I use her gumbo recipe every single time, written on an index card so soft from washing it's nearly see-through, and I swear to you the file gumbo tastes wrong if I don't hum while I stir it, because that's what she always did. Those memories hurt something fierce. They also keep her close enough to touch. Grief isn't a door you walk through and shut behind you. It's a room in your house you learn to live in, and some of you listening tonight know precisely what I mean by that. My daughter, Melissa, almost never misses a Sunday. She's 29, a speech therapist over at the Children's Hospital, sharp as a tack, and softer-hearted than she'll ever admit. At least she used to be, before she got worn thin standing between her husband and her father, and finally, quietly, stepped over onto his side of that line. Her husband is Preston Cole, 34 years old, a commercial real estate broker who wears a watch that costs more than my truck and calls it an investment. And listen, I never once cared about his toys. A young man's entitled to enjoy what he earns. What I cared about was the way he talked to people who had less than him, and how that talking always seemed to land on me, gentle as a paper cut, one at a time. Hal, you know they make hearing aids that connect to your phone now. That truck of yours belongs in a museum, not a driveway, doesn't it? Still doing your own wiring at your age, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Everybody would laugh polite. Melissa would squeeze my elbow after. Dad, he's just teasing. Maybe he was. But a joke stops being a joke the day it only ever lands on one man at that table, and never once on the fella telling it. I let it ride, year after year, for 2 reasons. Because I love my daughter more than I love my own pride. And because in her last week, Carol made me swear I would never let bitterness empty out our table. I kept that promise longer than any reasonable man should have. That particular Sunday started out about as good as a Sunday gets. Low Georgia sun coming through the pecan trees, a mockingbird carrying on out by the crepe myrtle, my transistor radio playing gospel real low from the kitchen window while the pork chops finished on the grill. Melissa brought her mother's potato salad, close enough to the original that it still catches me in the chest every time. Preston showed up 20 minutes late, carrying a single bottle of wine and a phone he never once put down. He looked at the chops on my plate and said, "Still eating like that at your age? Hal, your cardiologist must love billing you." I smiled and told him some things are worth whatever they cost you later. He laughed like I'd just proven whatever point he'd been aiming at. I let it go. We sat, and for a stretch it was good. Melissa told us about a little boy at the hospital who'd finally said his first full sentence after 8 months of therapy, and I watched her light up talking about it, the way she used to light up about everything, before her whole face learned to go careful around her husband. Then Preston looked over at my glass on the counter, the good bourbon I only pour out on Sundays, and said, "That's a lot for a man your age to be drinking." I told him I'd earned every ounce of it. He reached across like he wanted the salt, and instead his forearm swept clean across the counter where I'd just set the bottle of wine he'd brought, knocked it straight onto my kitchen tile, and it burst into a red mess across the floor I'd laid with my own 2 hands the summer Melissa turned 12. The whole kitchen went dead silent. My fork was still halfway to my mouth. Preston looked down at the wreckage for about half a second, then shrugged and delivered what I understood right then he'd been saving up all afternoon. "Guess that's what happens when old hands get too shaky to keep anything steady anymore. Maybe it's time somebody else started handling things around here." Nobody laughed. Not one soul in that kitchen laughed. His own mother stared into her plate. My grandson, 6 years old, went stone still in his booster seat, and I set my fork down slow, my shoulder singing its usual complaint, and I stood up. "I want to tell you something honest, because I promised you honesty tonight, and I intend to keep that promise." For one strange, ugly second, my first instinct was to apologize. To smooth it over, get the room breathing normal again, mop up the mess myself, and tell everybody it was fine, truly fine. Sit with that for a second. He'd just humiliated me in my own kitchen, and my reflex was to make everyone else comfortable. That's what 30 years of keeping the peace does to a man. It rewires the alarms clean out of him. If you've ever caught yourself apologizing for somebody else's cruelty just so the room could keep breathing, you know precisely the wiring I'm talking about. Then I noticed his phone, sitting face up on my counter, still lit from whatever he'd been scrolling through instead of watching his son eat supper. I walked over. I picked it up. He frowned and said, "What are you doing with that?" I didn't answer him, because there was nothing left in me worth handing him for free. I walked 6 slow steps to my kitchen sink, the same sink Carol used to stand at snapping green beans, and I turned on the disposal, and I dropped his phone straight down into it before anybody in that room understood what they were watching. The grinding lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then the whole kitchen exploded. Preston lunging for the switch, screaming words I won't repeat to you, his mother gasping, his father staring hard at the floor like it owed him an explanation, and my daughter, my own Melissa, turned on me with her eyes blazing and said, "Dad, have you lost your mind?" And there it was, the true wound of that whole Sunday. And it had nothing to do with wine or with a phone. 30 years of little cuts were lying shattered on my kitchen floor right alongside that wine bottle, and not once, not one single time, did my daughter ask if I was all right. The only casualty she could see was the phone. I picked my keys up off the counter. Nobody in that room made a single move to stop me. Backing my truck down the driveway, I caught one last look in the mirror. Preston still standing over that dead disposal like grief itself, Melissa crying at the door, wine still soaking into my grout. I should have felt ashamed of myself. Instead, I felt tired, and I don't mean old man tired. I mean the other kind, the kind that comes from finally setting a heavy thing down. 15 minutes later, out on I-16, her voicemail came through my truck speakers, her voice shaking so bad I barely recognized it. "Dad, you have no idea what you just started." I sat in a gas station parking lot and played it twice. She was right about one thing. I didn't have any idea, but I was fixing to learn. For 3 days, not a soul came by my house. Nobody called to ask if I'd managed to eat supper after mine got interrupted by a broken bottle and a busted disposal. What I got instead were 3 separate text messages, and I want to read them to you slow because the messages are the whole story. Sunday night, 11:40. "You need to replace his phone, Dad. That thing cost $1,200. Monday morning. This is so humiliating. His whole family saw that. Monday evening. Preston says if you apologize and pay to fix the disposal, we can all just move past this. Move past this." I sat at my kitchen table with coffee gone stone cold in front of me, reading those 3 messages over and over, doing the arithmetic on everything that wasn't written in them. Not one, "Are you all right, Dad?" Not one. What happened before I walked in? The house got quiet around me, the particular way a house gets quiet when you've filled it with someone for 30 years and then all at once you haven't. The refrigerator hummed. The hall clock ticked. Out back, the wind caught the grill cover and slapped it once against the porch rail, and for a second, I could have sworn I heard Carol hollering from the kitchen that the thing would blow clean into the next county if I didn't tie it down properly. I almost smiled, then I didn't. By Tuesday, the internet had done what the internet does. A cousin of Preston's posted something vague about elderly relatives who can't control their tempers anymore. Preston's mother shared a little graphic about forgiveness and grace. And one of Melissa's coworkers left a comment that I read maybe 40 times. Some people just get mean when they get older. Mean. I turned that word over in my hands for the better part of a day like it was a part I couldn't figure how to fit back into the engine. Then I did what a man who spent 31 years around wiring does when the feelings get to be too much to hold in his bare hands. I found something broken and I fixed it. The latch on my tool shed had been sticking since spring. I sat on an overturned bucket, took the whole hinge assembly apart, dropped a screw, spent 10 minutes hunting for it in the grass, muttering words Carol would have fined me a quarter for each one, and the whole time the same reel kept playing behind my eyes. The bottle shattering, Preston's shrug, Melissa's face when she asked if I'd lost my mind. Around 4 that afternoon, my neighbor, Gerald Thibodeau, showed up in my shed doorway. Gerald's 71, retired from the shipyard, walks a arthritic beagle up and down Bonaventure Road twice a day, whether the dog's interested or not. He'd been at my table plenty of Sundays since Carol passed, always turning up with a pound cake and some story about buying 2 by accident. "You got a minute?" he asked. I held up the hinge, trying to save a $4 part from the trash heap. He nodded like that answered something. Stepped inside, put his hands in his pockets, which worried me some, because Gerald Thibodeau is a man who could talk a fence post into agreeing with him for 20 straight minutes, and right then he looked like he'd rather be standing anywhere else on earth. "Been chewing on Sunday all day," he said. "Haven't we all?" I told him. He didn't smile back. "Hal, that wasn't an accident with the wine." I set the screwdriver down. "I know it wasn't," I said. "No," he said. "I mean, I watched it plain as day." He looked straight at that bottle before he ever moved his arm. Something cold walked clean through my chest right then. Suspecting a thing and hearing another man say it out loud are 2 entirely different weights to carry. Gerald glanced toward my driveway like he half expected Preston's car to still be sitting there. Then he took a breath and gave me the rest of it. "Back around Easter," he said. "I was walking Biscuit past your place of a evening. Preston was out front with 2 other fellas. Sounded like money men, laughing about something. I only caught the one piece of it clean." "What piece?" I asked him, and my neighbor of 19 years looked me dead in the eye and repeated my son-in-law's own words back to me. "Once the old man's not fit to live alone anymore, that house is our ticket to the coast." For a second I honestly believed I'd misheard him. My ears aren't what they used to be. Words slip past me in a noisy room easy enough. But we were standing 3 feet apart in a dead-still tool shed, and I heard every syllable clear as a bell. I laughed once, not because a single thing about it was funny, but because my body plain didn't know what else to do with a thing like that. My house. The house where Melissa learned to walk on that porch swing. The house where Carol took her last breath while I held her hand. Already itemized. Already spent. In some conversation I was never invited to. He'd just been waiting on the vacancy. I didn't sleep hardly at all that night. I sat at the dining table with an old photo album and took the whole tour. Melissa at 5, missing her front teeth, holding up a macaroni picture frame. Melissa at 17, rolling her eyes at her prom photos. Melissa at 25, laughing in the backyard beside her mother at some joke I've long since lost. Then the newer pages. Melissa and Preston at Thanksgiving. Melissa and Preston at Christmas. His arm around her waist, his smile installed just so, and me somewhere off at the edge of every frame, half cropped out, usually the one holding the camera. I ran my thumb across Carol's face in one photograph and asked the empty room, did I miss all of this? I don't rightly know who I was asking. God, myself, her, probably all 3 at once. Had I gotten so scared of losing my daughter that I'd shrunk myself down small enough to fit into the corner of my own family's picture? I picked up the phone to call her. My thumb hovered right over her name. Then I heard her voicemail again in my head. You have no idea what you just started. And I set the phone back down, and I made the first decision in years that had not one single thing to do with keeping other people comfortable. No yelling, no begging, no posting anything online. I was going to pay attention, quiet and careful, the way you listen to a motor that's about to tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. Because if Preston believed getting old made a man harmless, he'd gone and confused quiet with weak. And no man who spent 31 years running wire through other people's walls confuses quiet with off. After Gerald's visit, I stopped seeing Preston as simply rude and started seeing him as employed. Every compliment landed on a schedule. Every little favor was an invoice waiting on a due date. I told nobody. I confronted nobody. From the outside, my life looked exactly the same as it always had. On the inside, I was running full diagnostics. The first pattern surfaced quick. My future had suddenly turned into everybody's favorite topic of conversation. Melissa stopped by one Wednesday in her scrubs with 2 coffees, and for half an hour it was wonderful, just like before, a patient who'd finally strung a full sentence together, the tomatoes coming in behind my shed, the squirrel robbing my bird feeder blind. Then, stirring her coffee without looking up at me, she said, "Have you given any thought to downsizing, Dad?" I watched her over the rim of my mug. "This house is an awful lot for one person to keep up," she said. "It keeps me busy," I told her. "Your shoulder, though. Those porch steps get icy come winter." "I appreciate you worrying," I said. And then it came, casual as a weather report. "Do you still know where the original deed's kept?" There it was, not loud, not dramatic, just set down on the table easy as a napkin. "Somewhere safe," I told her, and gave her nothing else, and watched a little flicker of disappointment cross my daughter's face, a flicker I'd have missed clean a month earlier. Carol always said our girl was a terrible liar. Turns out she wasn't a whole lot better at hiding an assignment somebody else had handed her. The following Sunday, Preston turned up carrying a bottle of scotch that cost more than my whole week of groceries, the first gift he'd brought in 6 years of marriage that wasn't wrapped up as a insult. He praised my pork chops, asked after the truck, offered to pressure wash my whole driveway, said it wouldn't take him 20 minutes with the right machine. "I'm all right," I told him. "I like doing it myself." And I caught it. The quick, flat glance he traded with Melissa. The look married folks share when a script has just gone clean off its rails. That glance bothered me worse than any insult he'd ever landed on me, because insults are weather, but glances like that are climate. A week later he tried again, strolling up while I had my head under the truck hood. "Still doing your own oil changes?" he asked. "I enjoy it," I told him. "You know," he said, "if you ever wanted to simplify, houses on this side of Savannah are pulling crazy money right now. You could grab yourself a nice little condo somewhere near the water." "Not a beach man," I said, and kept on wrenching. He laughed, his networking laugh. "Well, you won't want to be maintaining all this forever." I slid out from under that truck and looked at him a beat longer than was comfortable for either one of us. "Preston, yeah, I've lived in this house 37 years. The day I decide I don't want it anymore, you'll be the very last one to know." His smile went stiff around the corners. "Fair enough," he said, and left 5 minutes after that. That conversation stuck to my ribs, not because it frightened me, but because it sounded rehearsed, delivered like a listing presentation he'd practiced clean through in his own car mirror on the drive over. That Tuesday I had a regular appointment with Walter Nash, my attorney of better than 20 years, the man who'd handled Carol's whole estate, who once played 9 holes of golf with me before we agreed never to speak of either score again. I'd only come in to update a beneficiary form. Routine as breathing. Walter finished the paperwork, slid the folder across his desk, then leaned back and said, "Hal, I've been going back and forth on whether I ought to tell you something." My stomach went tight. "Go on," I said. "Your son-in-law called this office," he said, a few months back. "About what?" I asked. "He didn't ask about your file," Walter said careful. "He asked general questions." "What kind of general?" "The kind folks ask," Walter said, "when they're curious how guardianship works for a aging parent." He wanted to understand what happens when a court decides a older homeowner can't manage his own finances anymore. He asked whether moving into assisted living changes who legally owns a house. My jaw got tight enough to crack a walnut clean in half. "What'd you tell him?" I asked. "The only thing I legally could," Walter said, with the ghost of a smile. Nothing at all. He never once said your name, Hal. He didn't have to, I said. We sat there together in that silence a good while, two old men reading the very same page. Finally, Walter said, I don't like assuming the worst about a man's family. Neither do I told him. But those aren't curiosity questions, Walter said. No, he said. Those are logistics. I drove home slow that evening, not on account of traffic, but because every single mile dissolved one more excuse I'd been propping up for 6 straight years. Maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe it's just his particular sense of humor. Maybe Melissa will handle it herself eventually. Maybe I'm just getting too sensitive in my old age. One by one, every last excuse fell clean away. That night, I stood out in my shed, my favorite room in the whole house. Tools hanging exactly where my hands expect to find them, and I picked up the framed photograph from our 30th anniversary, Carol laughing at me because I'd burnt the first batch of chops black. I ran my thumb over the glass and said out loud, they think getting old means it's all right to just move a man out of his own life. The shed didn't answer me back, but somehow she did anyway. Next morning, I called Walter before 8. I want to make some changes, I told him. What kind? He asked. The kind, I said, that makes certain nobody ever again mistakes my kindness for my signature. He was quiet a moment. Then he said, I'll clear my whole afternoon for you. Here's what surprised me most through all of it. That paperwork was never once about revenge, and Walter didn't treat it that way for one single second. He asked me one question that reframed the entire thing for me. What outcome lets you sleep at night, Hal? I thought on it honest and told him, I don't want to punish a soul. I just never again want somebody planning out the rest of my life without asking the man who's actually living it. So that's exactly what we built, across 2 meetings and a sit-down with a estate planner. A revocable trust. A independent trustee, no family involved anywhere in it, no friends, no leverage for anybody to pull. Updated medical directives. Rewritten power of attorney. Every single document saying the same quiet sentence in its own legal language. Nobody steps in over Harold Whitfield because they've decided amongst themselves they know better than he does. No traps set, no recordings made, no theatrics whatsoever. Just one grown man, locking his own doors from the inside. And I'll tell you something peculiar. The day those papers got signed, Preston got smaller in my head than he'd been in years. For the first time in months, my whole world grew back out past the edges of him. Gerald showed up one Saturday, not long after, with 2 coffees and a single question. You still got that '69 Mustang sitting out back under the tarp. Needs a whole lot of work, I told him. There's a swap meet up in Statesboro next weekend, he said, and shrugged the particular way men our age shrug when we're being careful with each other's loneliness. Might be time, he said. I nearly said no clean out of habit. Then I heard Carol plain as the radio. You're allowed a hobby too, Harold. The following Saturday, Gerald and I stood in a gravel lot full of old Fords and Chevys and more stories than sheet metal between us, drinking gas station coffee while strangers argued carburetors like it was foreign policy. Not one soul asked what phone I was carrying. Not one soul priced my watch. A silver-haired fellow spent a good 15 minutes telling me about restoring a Nova with his granddaughter. Another fella told me to stop by his shop any time and clearly meant it. Driving home that evening, I realized I'd laughed more in 4 hours than I had the whole previous 4 months put together. The week after that, I started volunteering Thursdays down at a non-profit garage that fixes up donated cars for veterans trying to get back on their feet. Alternators, brake lines, the occasional whole transmission. I came home filthy every single Thursday night and lighter every Friday morning after. Funny thing about helping a stranger, it reminds a man he's still worth something. At the very same moment, his own family seems to have forgot it. A month after that Sunday, Melissa called me. Where have you been? She asked. Out, I told her. You've been hard to get a hold of. Been busy doing what, exactly? Little fishing, little volunteering down at the garage. A pause on her end. You never told me any of that, she said. You never asked, I said back. Silence again, not a angry one, just a familiar one. For 30 years, I'd arranged my whole life around everybody else's calendar. Now they were going to have to find room in mine. Neither one of us knew that particular dance yet. One evening after supper, without exactly planning to, I pulled a yellow legal pad across my kitchen table and wrote my daughter a letter. Not a angry one. Not a legal one. The true one, about her mother, about how scared I'd been every single day since we lost Carol, about why I kept swallowing every little cut, because I honestly believed standing up for myself was the same thing as losing my daughter for good. And near the bottom, my pen wrote out a sentence that surprised even me as I was writing it. I never once needed you to choose between your husband and your father. I only ever needed you to notice when somebody treated your father like he didn't matter anymore. I sat looking at that line a long while, because it was true, and true things carry their own particular weight. Then I folded it up, sealed the envelope, wrote her name across the front, and set it in the top desk drawer. She wasn't ready for it yet. Maybe I wasn't either. A few days after that, Gerald leaned on my fence while I was washing the truck. "You hear the latest?" he asked. "Your son-in-law's been telling folks you've gone erratic." I laughed at that. "That's a new one," I said. Gerald grinned. "This part is. He's putting together a whole family meeting to clear the air." Neither one of us believed that for 1 second. 2 nights later, Melissa called, her voice careful as glass. "Preston wants everybody together this Saturday to settle things once and for all. Will you come?" she asked. I looked out across my yard, the crepe myrtle throwing its long evening shadow clean across the grass, and I noticed something remarkable. I wasn't dreading it one bit. I wasn't going there to defend myself, or argue my case, or audition for anybody's respect. That particular season of my life was over. "I'll be there," I told her. Calm as Sunday morning, she let out a breath. "Thank you, Dad," she said. And then I made one more phone call. "Walter, I think it's time," I told him. He didn't ask me time for what. He just said, "I'll meet you there. Now slow down here with me, because this next part I've gone over in my head 100 separate times, and you've earned every second of it." Saturday came in warm and clear, the kind of weather made for a cookout, and instead I drove to my daughter's house with my attorney's sedan following in my mirror the whole way, and the strangest thing rode shotgun with me: peace. A month before, I'd have rehearsed every argument the entire drive over. That morning there was nothing left in me to rehearse. The truth doesn't need any practice. Walter stepped out with his slim briefcase and asked, "Ready? Remember now, we're not here to fight anybody." "I know it," I told him. "We're just done pretending." Melissa and Preston's place is a big colonial out past Wilmington Island, the kind Preston loves calling his dream house, and generally forgets to mention which bank's doing most of the actual dreaming. Inside, everybody was already gathered. Melissa, Preston, his parents, my sister down from Augusta, my nephew, and Gerald standing off to one side, invited I'd come to learn, because Preston had heard he'd witnessed the wine bottle and wanted him managed, same as everybody else. The whole room went quiet when Walter and I walked in. Preston clocked the briefcase right off and laughed out loud. "You actually brought a lawyer," he said. I smiled polite and told him I brought a man who's real good with paperwork. Preston's grin stretched wider. "Wow, dramatic much." Meanwhile, Walter shook every hand in that room, calm as any Tuesday afternoon. Melissa's eyes kept searching my face. "Dad, what is all this?" she asked. "I believe," I told her. Preston wanted to clear the air. "I do," Preston announced, planting himself right by the fireplace with his hands in his pockets, hosting his own little intervention. "We've all been uncomfortable since that whole business with the wine." Nobody spoke a word. He scanned the whole room slow. "I think Hal owes everybody here a apology." Hal. Not Dad. Not even Mr. Whitfield. Funny how respect leaves a family one word at a time, same as everything else does. Walter glanced my way. I gave him the smallest nod, and the briefcase came open. "What's that?" Preston asked, his smile still holding on by a thread. Walter's voice was the same one I'd heard across his desk for 20 years running. Level, unhurried, inevitable as sunrise. "Mr. Whitfield asked me here today," he said, "because certain misunderstandings have developed regarding his estate and his future." Preston laughed once. "What estate?" Walter didn't so much as look up. "Over these past several weeks, we've completed a comprehensive plan. A revocable living trust, one folder onto the coffee table. Updated medical directives, a second folder. Revised durable power of attorney, a third. And a independent professional trustee." The whole temperature of that room shifted. Melissa blinked hard. "You did all this?" she asked me. "I did," I said. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't. I told her gentle. Preston crossed his arms tight. I don't see why we're even discussing this right now, he said. Walter looked straight at him for the very first time. I believe you do, he said. And for the first moment all afternoon, Preston stopped smiling. Walter folded his hands together. Some months back, he said, a caller reached my office with a set of questions. Melissa frowned. What questions? She asked. Walter kept his eyes locked on Preston the whole time. About guardianship, he said. The word landed in that room like a wrench dropped straight onto concrete. About how an elderly homeowner loses control of his own finances. Dead silence. About whether entering assisted living changes who owns a house. Melissa's head turned toward her husband in something like slow motion. You called my father's attorney, she said. Those were hypothetical questions, Preston said, too fast by half. I'm certain they were, Walter said, pleasant as could be. I work in commercial real estate, Preston said, louder now. Plenty of folks ask about that sort of thing. Thousands of people work in real estate finance, Walter agreed easy. They don't typically telephone their father-in-law's personal attorney to ask how an old man loses his own house. Nobody in that whole room so much as breathed. Preston's father stared hard at the carpet. His mother's hands twisted in her lap. And my daughter looked at her husband like a stranger had gone and unzipped his own face right in front of her. Why? She whispered. Preston threw his hands up. You're all making this sound so much worse than it actually is. I was planning ahead. For what? Melissa said, and her voice cracked straight down the middle. For our future, he said. And my daughter took one slow step backward, physically backward, away from her own husband, and said the sentence I know I'll be hearing for the rest of my natural life. My father's future is not your financial plan. The ceiling fan turned overhead. Nobody in that room moved a single muscle. Preston scanned around for reinforcements, his parents, my sister, my nephew, and found nothing waiting for him but floorboards and folded hands. And then Gerald Thibodeau, 71 years old, cleared his throat from over in the corner. I saw that bottle, he said, and every head in the room turned his direction. That wasn't an accident. That's ridiculous, Preston snapped. Gerald didn't so much as raise his voice. Men like Gerald never need to. I've known Hal 19 years, he said, looking Preston square in the eye. You looked right at that bottle before you ever moved your arm. And then, into the longest silence that whole afternoon had produced, Gerald added the rest of it. And I heard you back around Easter. Out front of the house, Preston's face lost its color by degrees, like a screen slowly dimming down. Once the old man's not fit to live alone anymore, Gerald recited it word for word, that house is our ticket to the coast. Melissa turned back to her husband one final time, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. You told me that was just a joke. Everybody's blowing this so far out of proportion, Preston said. No, she breathed. It wasn't a joke at all. And that's when I stood up, not out of anger, because I wanted every soul in that room to hear it at a regular conversational volume. I didn't come here today to embarrass a single person, I said. I came because I spent near 40 years building a home with my wife. I looked over at my daughter. I wanted my retirement to be about fishing and old cars and Sunday suppers with you. Instead, I found myself checking whether I needed to defend my own front door from my own family. Not one person interrupted me. I never once cared about that phone or that bottle of wine, I said, turning to face Preston direct. I cared that you found humiliating me funny. And I cared even more, this part I said to the whole room, that somewhere along the way I started believing keeping the peace meant I had to accept being disrespected. I was wrong about that. Dead wrong. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, and it wasn't tense either. It was just honest. Maybe the first fully honest silence that whole family had shared together in years. Walter quietly clicked his briefcase shut. I believe our business here is concluded, he said. Nobody made a move to stop us at the door. Behind me? Melissa said one single word. Dad. I turned around, and my daughter stood there with 100 sentences jammed up in her throat, not one of them able to move. And then she simply started to cry. I gave her a small, sad smile and walked on out into the sunlight. Out in the driveway, Walter asked how I was feeling. I started up my truck and hunted around for the right word. Lighter, I told him. He nodded like a man who'd seen that particular thing happen plenty of times before. That's what happens, he said, when people finally set down the things that were never truly theirs to carry in the first place. I drove on home with the windows rolled down, first time in a long stretch. And here's the lesson that whole afternoon left with me, the one I want you carrying home tonight. Even if you forget every other word I've said, the mistake most folks make is believing boundaries are walls you build up against people. They aren't walls at all. They're the paperwork of a man's own self-respect. And the people who get angriest about boundaries are always the ones who had plans laid out for your open door. Life didn't turn to sunshine and glass right after that meeting. Real life never does work that particular way. I still woke at 5:30 every morning. My shoulder still complained something fierce on cold mornings. Carol's chair still sat empty across my kitchen table. Some things don't go and change just because you finally told somebody the truth. 3 days later, Melissa called, and I let it ring on through. Not out of punishment, I simply didn't have the words in me yet, and went out and mowed the lawn instead. A week after that, she knocked on my door. She looked wrung clean out, dark circles under her eyes, hair tied back fast, no armor left on her anywhere. Looked like the little girl who used to come home swallowing tears after a lost softball game. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Of course you can," I told her. I made coffee. She sat down in her mother's chair without even thinking about it, then froze right up. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's all right," I told her, and meant every word of it. We didn't touch that coffee for a solid 5 minutes. Then she said, "I didn't know, Dad." "I believe you," I told her, and I watched her decide right then to be braver than that. "But that's not the whole truth," she said, staring down into her cup. "I saw the little jokes. I heard every one of the comments. I just kept telling myself they were small. They were small," I told her soft. One at a time, she looked up at me, but together they were a whole direction. Her eyes filled right up. "I should have stopped it years back," she said. And I put my hand over hers there on my kitchen table and told her the truest thing I had in me. "You loved your husband." "I still do," she whispered. "I know it," I told her, "and I love you." "I know that too," she said, and cried the quiet kind of crying that comes from a person finally setting down a weight they've carried too long. When she left that day, she hugged me harder than she had in years. 2 weeks after, she was back, angry this time, though not at me exactly, angry at the whole wreckage of it. "Preston says everybody ganged up on him," she said. I nodded. "He says Gerald exaggerated everything." "I see," I told her. "He says your lawyer ambushed him." I didn't say a word to that. And then came the question she'd actually driven all the way over to ask me. "Can't we all just move past this, Dad?" I looked at my daughter a long moment. Then I walked over to my desk, opened the top drawer, and took out that envelope with her name written across the front. "I wrote you this," I told her. She reached for it, and I drew it back gentle. "Not yet," I said. Her whole face fell. "Dad, why not?" "Because you're not ready for it yet," I told her. "And because right now, sweetheart, you're still busy trying to manage everybody else's pain except your own." She wiped at her eyes. "I don't know what to do," she said. "You don't have to solve it today," I told her. She hugged me at the door, and neither one of us said his name out loud. Another month turned over. Summer leaned on toward fall. The crepe myrtle went gold along its edges. Thursdays still belonged to the veteran's garage. Saturdays still belonged to coffee with Gerald or some swap meet across the county line. And for the first time since Carol died, I wasn't just passing my time anymore. I was spending it. Then one cool October afternoon, a third knock came at my door. Melissa stood on the porch alone, and something in her face had settled, calmer, older, cleaner somehow. She sat down and said 2 words. "I left," she told me. I didn't ask her for the particulars. She gave me the one that mattered anyway. "I asked him a single question," she said. "I asked whether he'd have treated you that way if Mom were still alive to see it." She smiled the saddest little smile I believe I've ever seen on her face. "He couldn't answer me, Dad. Not one single word." I closed my eyes a second, for Carol mostly. And then Melissa said the sentence that told me my daughter had come all the way back home to me. "I spent years calling it keeping the peace," she said. "But all I was really doing was asking you to carry the whole thing alone." And then she surprised me clean. She stood up, walked over to my refrigerator, and pulled out a butcher paper package. 2 pork chops. "I stopped by the market on my way over," she said. "You planning on cooking supper?" I asked her. "If you'll let me help," she said. And for the first time since her mother passed, Somebody stood beside me at that grill instead of waiting on me at the table. The coals crackled up. The fat started talking the way it does. And my daughter reached for the recipe box, pulled her mother's index card out soft, and squinted down at the faded old handwriting. "The bay leaf goes in first, right?" she asked. "Your mother would be awful proud of you," I told her, and my voice didn't hold entire steady through saying it. She laughed right through her tears. "I finally understand why these Sundays mattered so much to you," she said. "So do I told her, now more than ever. When supper was ready, she carried the plate out to me herself, careful with both hands, set it down right in front of me, looked me square in the eye, and said 6 words. "Eat it while it's hot, Dad." I don't believe she'll ever know the true size of that particular sentence. Months earlier, somebody had knocked a bottle of wine onto my floor to show a room full of people exactly what I was worth in their eyes. Now my own daughter was standing guard over my supper plate. No speech, no ceremony, just respect, served up warm. Sometimes that's the entire banquet, right there. She and Preston divorced quiet the following spring. No courtroom fireworks, no celebrating on my part whatsoever. Honestly, I felt a good deal more grief over it than victory. No father dreams of watching his daughter's marriage come apart. But I'd learned something along the way that can't be unlearned once you've learned it. A family cannot survive on respect flowing in just the one direction. These days, Sunday supper still happens regular. The guest list runs shorter now. Some weeks it's just Melissa and me at that table. Some weeks Gerald wanders over, or a couple of the fellas from the veterans' garage stop by after church lets out. The table's not as full as it once was. But the laughter in that room is real, and not one soul sitting at it is performing for anybody else's benefit. Every so often I'll catch myself glancing over at my own kitchen sink. That phone's long gone, ground up and washed clean down the pipe months back. What stayed with me wasn't the sound of it grinding. It was everything I finally came to understand after. I used to believe that protecting my family meant absorbing whatever they saw fit to hand me. I don't believe that one bit anymore. Getting older doesn't make a man worth less. It just means he's finally logged enough miles to tell the difference between love and obligation. And once you learn to tell those two things apart, friend, I promise you the whole road gets a good deal lighter under your wheels. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to actually go and do this week, and it won't cost you 1 red cent. Next time somebody's little joke lands on you, the same target one time too many, you say one calm sentence right out loud. "That one landed on me, not with me, once." No anger behind it, just plain fact. You'll learn everything you need to know from whatever happens next. And here's the question I'd leave sitting on your table tonight, the one I chewed on myself for 6 years too long. How much of what you've been calling keeping the peace has really just been you keeping quiet? Now it's your turn, because I've second-guessed that disposal 100 times over since. Put a 1 in the comments if you believe that phone deserved exactly what it got. One quiet answer to years' worth of noise. Put a 2 if you think I should have used my words that day instead of $1,200 worth of somebody else's electronics, because that disposal just handed him ammunition. Put a 3 if you think I waited entirely too long, and the real mistake was 6 years of swallowed insults, because some nights I'll admit I'd vote 3 myself. Tell me what part of this country you're listening from tonight, and what time it's showing on your own clock right now. It still amazes me how far a backyard story like this one can travel. And if you've ever been the one at the table everybody's just kidding about, or the parent whose own kids forgot to ask if you were all right, tell me about it down below. Somebody listening tonight is out there rehearsing a apology for something that was done to them, and they need to hear straight from you that they're allowed to set it down for good. If this story meant something to you tonight, subscribe and stay a while longer. I've got a lifetime of these still left in me, and this little corner of the internet only keeps its porch light burning because folks like you keep finding your way back to it. Thank you truly for sitting with me tonight. I'll see you in the next one. Respect isn't something you demand once and keep forever. It's something you have to notice slipping, quietly, one small joke at a time, and choose to name before the table goes empty. A closed mouth kept Hal's family fed but starving underneath. It took one honest afternoon to feed it for real. Love your people, but never confuse silence with peace or patience with disappearing. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while hoping to leave you with a genuine, positive lesson for life.